All right, today's thought for the weekend is simplicity, one of my most favorite concepts in the whole world, and something that I think is way undervalued in computer science and society in general. To me, it's the most important thing to think about when you're designing software, and in many other areas also. Sadly, today, there are many forces working against simplicity. For example, in computer science, there seems to be this macho thing that if I can create something that you can't understand, I must somehow be smarter than you. Well, it doesn't really make sense because it isn't that hard to create things that people don't understand. But there is this macho thing that complexity is cool somehow in building computer systems. In classes, as you learn algorithms, they seem to get more and more complicated as they get better. And so it'd be easy to conclude that the best things always have to be kind of complicated. Or simplicity is really hard to achieve. It's a lot easier to make something complicated than to make something simple. And when it comes to software, it's almost impossible to keep software simple. It just gets more and more complicated as a program lives. In fact, we really can't stop complexity. We can only slow it down. So it's really, really hard to maintain simplicity. And then the last one that really bugs me is that complexity can be profitable. We've all seen this, where companies will try and confuse their customers with terms that are so complicated that you can't really compare their product to anybody else's product. You can't really figure out how much you're really paying. For example, your credit card billing statement with various charges, or your banks, or airline fees. You get on a plane and you call the flight and say, "Excuse me, I think the armrest is missing on my chair." You say, "Oh, I'm sorry, sir, that's an extra cost item. You must have missed that when you checked in." I hate that, but I wonder, is there a class at Stanford Graduate School of Business on how to make money by confusing people? Because that's what companies seem to do. Fortunately, though, there are also some good reasons for simplicity. When it comes to building systems, it's the only way to make them easy to build and maintain. And when it comes to software, the fundamental thing that limits us is complexity. It's our ability to understand what we've designed and make it work. And so if systems get complicated, we can't add new features and can't maintain them. To me, one of the most amazing engineering accomplishments in computer science was the development of the Unix operating system, which is the predecessor for Linux, which started off as just an unbelievably simple yet powerful system that allowed it to grow and become what's become Linux today. Really amazing engineering feat. Another reason for simplicity is sometimes that's the only way to get it to work. I hope you're all coming to appreciate how hard it is to write synchronization code that works. If there's one thing you should take away from this class is synchronization is hard. Believe me, it's not just you, it's everybody. It's hard for everybody. And so fundamentally, things like that, they're unlikely to work unless they're simple. You write complicated synchronization code, I can probably find a bug in it 100% of the time. Security is another area. If it's not simple, it's probably going to have security holes in it. And sales, fortunately, there are forces where companies want to make things more complicated, but consumers appreciate products that are simple and easy to use. Apple's a great example of this. Apple's making money hand over fist, and I don't begrudge that to them because they've just done an amazing job of coming up with these systems that are beautiful, super simple, easy to use systems. I think Apple's single-handedly changed the way people think about computer systems. They've made simplicity almost kind of cool in computer systems. And then finally, simple systems tend to be faster, particularly software. When it becomes complicated, it becomes really slow too. Very hard to make it run quickly. So how do you get simplicity? That's the hard thing. And I don't have a simple formula for you, but the first thing is intolerance. Just don't accept complexity. We all recognize when things are getting complicated. There's various red flags. You can tell. When that happens, start asking, is there some other way I can do this that will make it simpler again? Second, how do you think about things? I think about computer systems as a ratio of power divided by complexity. That is, we want systems that are really powerful, but we want them really simple. So the best systems are those that have a high amount of power and a small amount of complexity. Power divided by complexity. Think about that trade-off. Third, if you want simplicity, you have to sweat the details. Complexity, a system doesn't become complicated because of one fundamental mistake somebody made. It's typically a whole bunch of little things. People thinking, well, this one little kludge won't matter if it gets this bug fixed today rather than tomorrow. And so the complexity accumulates in little tiny chunks. If you don't want complexity, you've got to just not let those chunks accumulate. Sweat the details. And then most important, simplicity comes from a really, really deep understanding. The way you get simplicity is you have figured out something that is fundamentally important and you focus the system around what's really important. So the way I recommend doing this is you study a lot of different systems and use cases and see how they are alike and how they're different. And you look for the commonality. What are the things in common? Those are the things that are important. And then you try and find a really simple way of doing those things that are common to all these different areas. So once I've solved this, I've now solved a whole bunch of other problems. So understanding what's important, separating what's important from what's not important is fundamental to simplicity. So just to conclude, I'd say, instead of using your creativity to confuse people, try and find easy, obvious ways of doing things. So, for example, if somebody tells you, what you just did is so obvious anybody could have thought of it, you should feel deeply flattered. Oh gosh, thanks. Can't believe you said that. Because the truth is, anybody didn't think of it. You know, the things that are most powerful are those that seem totally obvious once you see them, super simple, but you thought of it and nobody else thought of it before. That's a huge compliment. So simplicity is my thought for the weekend. Have a great weekend and see you Monday.